Good morning, everybody. Well, it sounded very loud. I'd like to thank Sweden Bio for inviting me to make this presentation today, and hopefully my presentation will run you through a sort of strategic way to try and target investors and hopefully raise some money. Just a little bit about my background. I run the pharma bio team at Citigate. I've been involved in this sector for over 30 years, which I think has been longer than anybody else I've seen up on the stand today. My background is I spent a period as an analyst, pharma analyst, covering companies in the UK, Europe and Japan. I've also been a fund manager. I used to manage about €500 million in the Japanese equity market, and I managed communications for both biotech and medtech companies. In fact, I used to work in Sweden, in Malmö, for a company called RUHB, which is part of the Gettinger Group. I manage a team of 6 people in London, 3 of whom are PhDs, and we focus on providing communication support to our clients that actually delivers results. We are very, very focused on what our companies need to achieve and how communications can help them get there. Today's presentation is about fundraising. Since the beginning of 2009, we've been involved in over 30 transactions where people have raised money. They've been both private and public financings. As you can see, the geography is pretty wide, and for some of these clients, we worked on a number of successful transactions. So what I'm going to run through now is a simple process to try and maximize your chances of success. As you've heard, I hope you didn't hear that. That sounded extremely horrible. As you've heard, there's a lot of companies competing for capital, but also there's a lot of VCs competing for the right ideas. So investors are under pressure to find the right companies. So what you have to do to maximize your chances is you need to do the right preparation. You need to understand what your idea is. Why do you need money? What is your business concept? What's the science it's based on? How big is that your idea? And you need to think quite broadly about the potential of what you can achieve. You also need to think about how you can go about achieving it. Would a virtual approach be the best one? Or do you need to actually create a company to make it happen? And I think the final thing is, as the individual driving the process, you need to think very carefully about your ambition. You know, this is a long-term industry. It takes a long time to make progress. And you need to be pretty clear at the starting point where you might want to get off, what sort of team you're going to build, etc. So there's a lot of thinking you need to do before you start communicating anything. And in some cases, you might need to go and speak to people and get some advice about this. As I said, it's a competitive process raising money. From the figures that we've seen earlier, you know, from the approaches VCs get, less than 5% of the companies get financed. For some VCs, it's even smaller. You need to think very carefully how much you need. We've seen lots of companies who talk about raising funds, and what they want to raise is governed by what they think they can actually raise from the market as much as what they actually need. Any fundraising ends up in a discussion, and therefore you should think very carefully how big your ambition is and how you need to fund it. Final thing is you need to think about what type of investors you want. If you're a successful business, they're going to be working with you for a long time. You need to think whether you want to go to high worth net individuals, VCs, corporate. There's a lot of options, but you need to do the preparation and thought yourself. And this is just carrying on from this theme. You saw the presentations earlier today. As you can see, there are some themes that are common from each of the groups, but the personalities, the timelines, the expertise they can bring can be markedly different. So you need to get to know these people. You need to try and take a systematic approach to it. We see some companies who have a sort of random motion approach to raising money, i.e. they go out and just see investors because somebody says they're investing. what you need to do is you need to sit down and think very carefully about the type of investor you want. There are databases that you can use to understand where investors have invested in the past, who they co-invest with. As you saw, the man from Sunstone Capital, in one of his slides, says he's co-invested with 32 other investors. So this is a complex universe. You need to spend some time getting to know it, because there is no doubt that this understanding can help you a great deal. If you start a scientific project or a business project, market research is a pretty fundamental part of doing that project. It's the same when you're trying to raise money. Having worked out what your idea is and who you're going to target, you now need to work out how to explain what your equity story is, why somebody should invest. In this list here, these are the things that you've got to try and address. You've got to come up with why these things are going to happen and how they are going to generate value for the investor. You've got to make that clear and as concise as possible so that the investor is in a position to make the right decision. A business plan is not the right document. That's an operating document that describes what you're going to do. It is not a document for raising money. One important thing about an equity story is you have to be very clear about what you have achieved and what is reality and what is aspiration. That's a very important line in any discussion about what you're trying to do as a business. If you overstep that mark, your chances of getting investment are close to zero. So having invested time in your idea, understanding the marketplace and what you're going to communicate, you now need to start the process. Obviously, you're going to target some investors. I would suggest that before you start, you develop what people call an elevator pitch. What are the key things you need to get across to people in a very short period of time? A lot of people try and explain too many things, and you lose the key concept. It's really important that people simply understand what is your unique idea and how it's going to make a difference. You need to develop the right pitch presentation. It needs to be able to sell your vision. If it doesn't, it isn't going to work. And finally, you need to be prepared to be challenged. And you should spend a lot of time rehearsing this before you go and speak to anybody. If you haven't thought about the right answers to some pretty fundamental questions, you will not get any investment. You need to prepare properly. You also need a website that people can go to. Why? Because it's at least an external view of what you've been communicating before. It shows you have a history. And importantly, it should say exactly the same as anything in your equity story. Because one thing that investors are very hot on is differences in what you tell them. That usually is a clear sign that something is not well thought out, or some of the facts are not correct, and that's something that requires investigation. And your news flow, as I said, is a key element in helping people understand the progress you've made and the fact that you've been successful and achieved things historically. You then need to leverage the media, because sitting in a room here, we can access so many people. In order to get your story widely recognized as possible, you need to speak to some of the key trades titles. Depending on the market, you may need to speak to the nationals, etc., but you need to speak to the media. The media bring credibility to your story. They bring momentum, they bring life to it. If you don't engage with the media, only your immediate circle of contacts will have any idea what you do. And in a global industry, that is not the best situation to be in. And you need to manage this communication alongside your fundraising activities. As the last speaker said, you need to prepare the ground. You need to show some sense of achievement and momentum. You can't just turn up and say, I'd like some money tomorrow, please. That just doesn't work unless you've got an incredible idea. Just finally, at the last plug, is in order to be successful, you need to work with somebody who understands the process, who understands the market, who can understand your technology, and most of all, is committed to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David Dible. You're speaking a lot about the company, what we can demand of the company. What person in the company is, you say, most suitable to drive this story happening, because someone have to do the work?
Yeah, it depends on the structure of your company, but in most cases it's the CEO who has to make these things happen, or the founder is the person who is. But
is the CEO suited for that usually?
It depends on his background, and therefore it depends on whether he's happy to hire a team or build people around him to make it happen.
But do they bring a lot of enough time to these questions?
It depends on the balance between actually doing the science and making the business happen and making the company successful. But in reality, investors will want to see the CEO before they make any investment anyway.
And looking for these,
as you saw in some of the slides, the team is a crucial element in people deciding what to do.
And when you look at the crucial advisor, or the choice of the advice, which is quite crucial, what do you think that the companies should have on their shortlist to check out?
Well, I think the most important thing in my mind is to understand the investment universe, understand who the investors are. I don't think companies spend nearly as much time and effort and money on doing that. The universe is complex, it's shifting, and that is something that you should spend time and effort on. You know, if you're a scientist and you go and see another scientist, you have a very clear idea of who you're meeting, what they've published, what their interests are, etc. If you're in an important meeting with an investor to raise money, you should at least have the same information.
Very interesting. Can speak a lot about this forever, I think. David Dible, any more questions to David Dible? Not so far. They will catch you out in the corridor. Okay.